You're at home when the phone rings. It's a family member asking for yet another favor. Instantly, that familiar knot tightens in your stomach. You want to say no, but the fear of disappointing them compels you to agree once again. After hanging up, your mind races with all the things that you need to accomplish, and guilt washes over you, making you feel selfish for even considering your own needs. You convince yourself that saying yes is the right thing to do. It's the loving thing to do. You catch yourself going over this conversation in your head, anxious about how saying no could lead to conflict, hurt feelings. In this episode of the Robert Jean Experience, we explore the cost of being nice and how it's linked to childhood trauma, depression, anxiety. And Robert is one of America's leading experts on stress, trauma, PTSD. He is a highly respected behavioral engineer, neuroplastician, and drug rehab consultant. I'm your co-host, Crystal Derksen, and here is your host, Robert Jean. Hi, Robert.
Hey, good to see you. Interesting topic. Why do we do what we do? Isn't that right? Why is it that we do these behaviors and then beat ourselves up, question ourselves, or even forced to do it? So it all begins somewhere. And the question is where and why. All right?
Yes, that's right. And we've been told all our life, be nice. And many people are stuck in this cycle of sacrificing themselves. And what I want us to do today is I want us to take our listener on a journey to understanding the connection between being nice and how it's linked with childhood trauma.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I guess the first question is, what is childhood trauma?
Yes, what is childhood trauma?
Well, unlike others, childhood trauma is not really trauma. Childhood trauma is emotional education. It is education on how to survive in the world based on those who are in control. So again, we talk about trauma. What is trauma? As I said, it's not a post-traumatic stress disorder. It's not a disorder. It is post. It is from the past. It affects us now and it affects our behaviors. But why is it we do what we do? That's the million-dollar question. And so we reel it back to the past. So here it is. You're born into an environment. You got people, whether it's your parents, step-parents, grandmothers, people who run the orphanage, whatever it is, these individuals has a role in your life. They're to train you, educate you, impact you, and direct you. Now, again, like little Crystal, she's in kindergarten and she goes to school and her friend says, "Hey, come over to my house after school." So Crystal just rides the bus with her and goes to her friend's house and having a good time. And then Crystal decides to go home. And when she gets home, she has some very angry, upset people. And her mother or father says, "Go get the switch." Now, that switching could be called a trauma. And it is a trauma, but it is an emotional education because they're training Crystal not to do that again. Now, again, you think about it. Why would Crystal be nice? Because she doesn't want to get hurt. She doesn't want to get somebody upset. So PTSD or trauma is an education on the survival of that world in which she came from. So it's not a disorder. You're not broken, but you are emotionally conditioned to act and perform the way you act and perform today. And by the way, you do this now today without ever thinking because it is neurologically written in the cells of your brain and it drives your action without you consciously even knowing why you do what you do. You just do it because you know you'll survive. You know you've been trained to do what it is you do. So basically, trauma is not bad. Trauma is trying to keep you alive and safe today based on history. And the history is written in the cells of your mind. Now, we talk about what happened to Crystal, what happened to you guys, whoever you are. Those events are designed to keep you alive and to survive that environment which you come from. Now, people have different environments. You could be the oldest and the youngest when they have totally different environments because even though they live in the same place, they have different players impacting them. So it's not a disorder. You're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just staying alive. The bad thing is you've had some people have had some really bad things have been exposed to: physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, war memories, date memories, you name it. And the brain will grab this. Now, by the way, let me just say this to clarify everything. The events did not give you PTSD. They didn't give you PTSD. It's what your brain captured, grabbed, and uses on you. Because five people can have the same event and five people act totally different. And it's based on internalization.
Are you saying that it's not the event?
No, it's not the event. It's how we internalize the event.
Mhm.
It's how we process the event. It's how we create the event within ourselves. Now, just think about it. You and I are here today. And if you remember an event that happened 10 years, 15 years, or 20 years, when you remember it, you're recalling your personalized translation interpretation of that experience.
Correct.
So which means your limbic system, which is your unconscious mind, will encode what you witnessed in your brain. Now, it will filter out some things and it will not filter out other things depending on the intention or the focus or the intensity of the event at the time. So you don't have PTSD because of the event. You have PTSD because your brain captured pieces of that event to keep you safe and to keep you in alignment with. So again, remember, if five people can have the witness the same thing, one person is extremely traumatized, the other four aren't. Why? It's
Right.
internalization.
That's right. So
So
we all have a different, even two people in the same household with the same parents, they
same
have
event,
to do.
same event, and act totally different.
Yes. So it's how we capture the information. It's how we're internalizing it.
Yeah, now it's unconsciously done and sometimes consciously focused. It's how you replay it after an event. It depends on what you do with it. Now, we call these imprints. Now, an imprint, now again, we've been told in our life that you're imprinted 7 years of your life. That's not true. You're imprinted your whole life. Imprints are updated and changed. If you know what you're doing, you know how to do that.
Mhm.
I do, right? So again, so you have imprints. So now you have an experience. Like how many times? I mean, I don't know if you've watched ever. You ever heard of Gabor Mate? You ever heard of?
Yes.
I listen to his stories, and I started listening to him. He talks about what I talk about. I go, he's got to be watching my videos, right? But
Yes.
but I don't know if he is or not because there's a lot of things that we do say the same, but there's some major points that we don't say the same. The
Correct.
difference between what now he talks about, his family was in Europe and the war, and the mother gave him away for someone to take care of, and so he's saying that he is traumatized by that childhood event. He's not. He is traumatized by the meanings he give to that event. That event's over. It's not real today. But again, these are imprints, and what happens is when you have something like this, is like a hook in our brain. We're going to hang all of our stuff on it, and we build a case against ourselves. So it's not the event, but it's rather the meanings we give to it. It's like translation. I speak English only, but there are some people who speak more than one language. They have an internal translator. We all have an internal translator. We translate the world based on our inner view. Now, again, even though Gabor Mate doesn't remember being handed to a stranger and raised up, but he was told stories. And he was told stories and he created memories of these stories inside of his mind. You do that. I do that. We all do that. So the importance is one, having a clear understanding. Trauma is an educational system. And the trauma is educating you on how to survive in that environment. But the problem is that environment, we bring it and we install it in our own head because of what happened, and then we build it, groom it, and then create a whole story of why we are messed up, so to speak. But you're not really messed up. You're just actually following your emotional trainings.
Mhm.
Now, does it feel real? Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, when I was a kid, there's a lot of stuff I cleaned up as a child, because there was a look on my dad's face. Oh, shit's getting ready to happen.
Yeah.
Of course, you're conditioned to see that look. And it's in the early days when I first started working on myself with, I started out with church. Grandma took me to church, and I started with that system. And then I started a little bit of hypnosis, got scared of that because of what the church said. And then I started studying neuro linguistic programming, basically the mechanics of the mind. And then I found a neuroplasticity program or a psychosensory process called EFT. Now, EFT is okay, but has I would call a faulty belief system, but it can work. And so early days, like 2000, my wife and I at the time, we went to a restaurant at Quiznos, and I was staying in line. I said, "Hey, Anna, I think we have a coupon. You mind going out and getting it while I'm staying in line?" So she goes out, and when she came into the restaurant, I saw that look. It was my dad's look. And it went right through me. Now, consciously, I didn't know it was my dad's look. I just felt whatever. And so, but at that point, I had a skill and I diffused that reaction. Now, I've seen this reaction, this facial expression on other people. And so, where did this look came from? It came from my trainings as a child, and the warning sign when you saw the look, bad things are going to happen. So we unconsciously respond to the world, but it's not really again, my dad was dead at that time. He had a car accident and died. My dad didn't do that to me. Who did it to me?
You
My
did.
brain.
Yeah.
So this is the key point. When you visit memories in your mind, those are your memories, and your brain created those memories. It translates and interprets those memories. So anytime you visit a memory and you feel bad, who's making you feel bad? Your brain is triggering this bad reaction. So therefore, when you think about it, your brain will create the entity called daddy inside my head, or your mama inside your head, or the abuser inside your head. Those are yours, not them. They could be dead and gone. You may not ever see them again. But you're the one who's carrying this image in your mind. And you don't do it consciously because these may be great concepts right now for you.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Everything inside you is you. Everything inside you is yourself. Your dad cannot fit in your head. If you think about it, that's not a very big space.
That's right.
You internalize it and create. So this is the big misnomer about trauma and memories. Memories are not real. They're created. Memories are malleable and adjustable. That's called neuroplasticity. You could take a memory and make it worse, and you can take a memory, if you're really smart, and turn it into gold. And your life will respond differently.
So I want to go back to what you said about Dr. Gabor.
Yeah. Gabor, yeah.
Dr. Gabor said that, if I recall this correctly, he said that he didn't remember those events. It was he read, or his mother read the journal back to him.
Well, there you go.
In that, are you saying that as he's reading this, someone's telling him this story, he's being programmed?
He's creating images, memories, and stories in his head. And as he hears the tone of the voice and the emotions of the mother, it's going to give value in his brain.
Okay, but this is so normal for families. It is so normal to sit down in a family gathering and hear a lot of stories about granddad, a lot of stories about what mom suffered with or dad suffered with. And so when we tell these stories, we're downloading our children with those stories, or we're conditioning.
We are hypnotizing them to have the problem. We're training them to have, it's like going to the school. You sit at this little desk, and on the chalkboard, she writes scribbles. But at the time, they were just scribbles. But the teacher said, these are the letters of the alphabet. And this is a true story with me. She said, Robert, this is your name. I said, okay, what do I do with it? She said, I want you to take these letters and write on this big piece of paper, big lines with a big fat pencil. So here it is. I am introduced into a story about something, and then I'm creating a value of it. Now, again, the worst thing you could tell your children is about how horrible your birth was or how your dad was drunk and gone, because you're training them and educating them to create a problem for themselves. It becomes a life imprint. And then you start building on top of this hook that you've been given to. So we create value in education. You can watch, how many times I worked with somebody who watched a movie on TV? I'm one of them, right?
Yes.
I watched a movie on TV. I was about 18 years old because I in Oklahoma at that time, 18 you could buy beer. So I was a popular kid in my class because I'm the only one who could buy beer, right? I flunked second grade, right? Because I moved around a lot. So here it is. My buddies and I, we go watch this movie, and about weeks, months later, we go to Fort Cobb, which is about 60 miles away. And I'm a jock. I ran football, I played track, I wrestled. And so I'm swimming across this lake, and all of a sudden the theme of that movie, dun 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 dun, dun, oh shit, sharks. There's no sharks in Oklahoma. I never saw a shark in my life, but I was scared and I frantically swam to the shore. Now, by the way, I was educated and trained by watching a movie.
Right. Jaws 3.
No, I think it's the first one.
Oh, the
But
first.
but the point is,
Mhm.
we are trained by stories, and you'll create what we call a false memory of someone told you something, and then you hang your whole life on this one memory. And we compound it over the years. So did mom's story traumatize us? No, we internalized it and gave meaning to it. And I didn't know watching this movie is going to have an impact,
Mhm.
but it did. And so this is how the brain works. So you can create a bad life based on somebody's story. And you know what? It becomes real. It becomes
Yes.
real inside you. I mean,
Yeah.
it feels real anyway. Let's say it that way.
Right. So then what do? You're at a family gathering. People are talking about these sad stories.
Well, at the time when you're a kid, you're just emotionally ignorant. And most people are listening to this call. This may be great concepts, you know?
Correct.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I created this in my head. I'm the one that's, and by the way, if you think about it, every character in your mind is yourself. Every memory is a program on how to act and perform in the world.
Yeah.
The problem is you're not picking good ones to create your life. Some people do.
Right.
But why is it like I had a sister-in-law who she was sexually abused by her stepfather, right? And I said, we need to clean this stuff up. And when I say clean it up, we make peace with it where it's not real and true anymore. And she said something very profound. She goes, well, who will I be if I let it go?
Yeah.
I said, you're a Christian. Why would you create a value over something horrible?
Right.
Why don't you create a value of something good? You know why we do that? Because the painful experiences to the brain, the limbic brain, not consciousness, is a survival skill. So we're going to hold on to the bad thing so it doesn't happen again. But the
Yes.
bad thing is, since it's in our brain, it's guaranteed to happen again, if only by yourself, within yourself, and to yourself. So that's why the bad. And it's like the other day I said, why is it the good always wins? I said, to your brain, nothing's bad. To your brain, it's survival. It's introducing the real world to you. So you operate to stay alive based on your emotional trainings. And so to your brain, I mean, I call the brain the intelligent idiot. And the reason why I say that is you could teach it to do something and it'll do it really well. If you teach it how to cut with a knife, it'll cut everything up. It'll cut your shoes up, your house up. It'll cut your pajamas up and your pillow up because it knows how to do that, but not realizing it's causing problems. You don't have any clothes anymore. You can't sleep on your pillow anymore. You got a mess. But to the brain, giving you a panic attack is trying to keep you safe. Making you give in is keeping you safe based on trainings and emotional exposure.
Right.
Now, let me say one more thing.
Mhm.
I am an expert in trauma. I know how to change it. Now, I have volunteered. I've been doing this work for 26 years on this month. For 26 years, I've been helping people change the worst possible traumas. I've been in drug rehabs. Drug rehabs is the mecca for traumatic shit. The worst stuff you could ever imagine. I work with it. I've done it. I've cleaned it up. We talk about people who are coming from Afghanistan, wars, deaths of friends, deaths of buddies, deaths of all this stuff, horrible events. Joshua comes in and he says, I never told anybody about this stuff. Now, Joshua, he's waking up 6 times a night, every night. Anxiety, panic attacks, he's out there smoking, anxiety. And he's in a drug rehab because he's using his best coping mechanism, and that was drugs to numb the pain. Well, it got him in trouble. So here it is. And I said, listen, you don't have to tell me. Just pick the worst memory. Don't tell me anything about it. I help you. I help you change it. And so I cleaned up the first one and I said, all right, tell me what happened. He goes, it doesn't seem like I'm there anymore. Before I was. I said, listen, Joshua, we did one memory. Give me the rest of them. Let's do a list. Let's get all the bad memories. We'll clean it up. Now, again, it's over. He's not in Afghanistan, but his brain was still there because the brain figured out that's the world that I'm exposed to, and he takes that world everywhere he goes until we flatten it out. And that's what we did. We flattened out the memories and references.
Right. So can you explain how your brain uses that information against you over and over again? So if you hold those memories, they're
Mhm.
there. What are some things like explain what are some things that happen?
Well, I mean, for example, like you said, you started at the beginning, why am I being nice and I'm not really being nice to me? I'm just giving in. So why would you do that? Well, because when you were raised up, if you spoke up, you got spanked. If you were humiliated, embarrassed because you didn't go along with what mom or dad said. So this memory is now dictating today's behavior without you ever going back and revisiting that memory. It's like you know how to write on a piece of paper. You can write your name, write a check out, write a story. Well, this story and writing a check out are metaphoric expressions, just like letting someone you using you. You do it without thinking. So when you write down on your check, write your name, you're not going back, okay, kindergarten, letter R. You don't do that. You just do it unconsciously. And that's because that's what the limbic system does. It uses the information to keep you alive. It's using your information to stay in alignment with the environment in which you come from. The bad thing is you're bringing an environment that's no longer relative, no longer important, no longer need to be real. But to you, it is.
It is
Yeah.
interesting. Okay, so let's go back to the being nice. So you're a
Mhm.
child, you're trained to be nice. Many people are told to be nice. That is our world.
Mhm.
So this program, this being nice program, I don't even know what you would call it. What would you call that?
Well, we talk about experiences. Now we're going to call it trauma, but let's say emotional educational experiences. All right. So again, when you are impacted with something, you're going to handle it several ways. One, you're going to fight back. You're going to fight back, or two, you'll take off running, and three, you'll numb and dumb or surrender, give in. So you may choose, or that person may choose just to give in because it's easier that way. So it's a coping mechanism.
Right.
And so you figure out at that point what you're going to do with your brain does, and sometimes you consciously. And so that's why it is. So you're conditioned to respond in a way to keep you alive. Now, first of all, you may fight against it at the beginning and you realize they're bigger and meaner than you are. And then eventually you say, okay, I'm not going to fight because I can't win that fight. And then you may choose a different alternative way, such as giving in, surrender and let them do what they need to do. And then you wake up and leave.
Hmm. So is this connected to chronically like suppressing? So in order to be nice, you have to chronically suppress,
Well, when you say suppress, let's say not go there.
not go there. So it's
You don't
the
want to go there. You don't want to go there. So when we talk about, let me just say this: the number one coping mechanism in the world. Everybody does this. As a matter of fact, it's designed within the self, and that is how to deal with this stuff. And the first thing is when you feel bad or bad things happen, the best way to get out of it is redirect, move away, avoid. So one of them is numb and dumb. I don't want to remember. I don't remember. Two, you could shop, go shopping. Three, you can drink whiskey. You can smoke. You can eat a whole cheesecake. You can work your butt off and refocus and redirect. These are coping skills. But the problem with these coping skills, it doesn't actually change anything. It just redirect focus. I don't want to be here. So therefore, I'm going to move my thought over here. So again, like I had a conversation recently with a 77-year-old woman. She's a nurse and she just retired. And she said, you wouldn't think I'm 77 by listening to me and looking at me because I'm active. She said, but I retired and now all of a sudden my body is having all kinds of pains, stuff, and getting diagnoses and this and that. And I can't break down food. I said, well, let me explain. Your coping skill in life was to stay busy. And now all of a sudden you retired And your brain goes, oh shit, all the stuff we're running from is now coming out. It's going to come out at either an addiction, it'll come out with nightmares, it'll come out with worry, it'll come out with physical pains. And you know how many people who have come to my system who have severe fibromyalgia, ME, lupus, all kind of physical issues, or all kinds of panic attacks and all this stuff after they retire is because they're still running and their running mechanism has ended, not working anymore. So they're going to have to figure out how to do something. And so this is how the brain operates. So, the bad thing is that remember, so you have something bothers you and upset you, and you're going to run to the cupboard and eat something. And the bad thing about life is that the older you get, the more that bad stuff is packed up on side of yourself because you never figured out how to deal with it. You kept running to the cupboard or just staying busy. And I see this a lot when people are getting older, they can't run as fast because they're older, And so here it is, she saved all her money, and guess what she's going to do the rest of her life? Spend all her money trying to figure out how to get her health back because she's been running from her stuff.
That's right. Wow.
So this is how the brain works. So it's trying to cope and deal with the world.
Okay. So I know psychologists talk about repressing and suppressing. So your take on that is it's all coping mechanisms.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So
Definitely.
then do you use repression, or do you talk about repression or suppression?
Well, first of all, I don't use that languaging. I know there's memories that are stored within.
Yeah.
I know that today's problems are metaphoric expressions of yesterday's events. And of course, you, we, us, others have developed a great skill of forgetting. It's almost like they don't want to remember their childhood. They don't want to remember, and that's a good thing. It's like Dr. Richard Bandler. There was a twin sisters. They both were kidnapped, both raped, and thought they were killed. But the guy was good at kidnapping and raping, but not good at killing. Both of them was alive. One of them remembered everything, and she's in a mental institution. The other remembered nothing, and she's not in a mental institution. All right.
Wow.
So these are the same event, different ways of processing it. Now, the bad thing is, even if you don't remember, it still knocks on the door and affects your decisions. It affects your health. It affects your value as a person unconsciously because it'll switch it to processing it in a different way. It's not gone because I always say if it's in you, it's in you.
Mhm.
And so I have a great skills of finding it, changing it, and updating it. I've been doing this, like I said, I've been doing it for 26 years. My first client was my wife. She had obsessive compulsive disorder, which is not a disorder, it's a coping mechanism. And so I had to figure out why and how and what. And come to find out, before we got married, she's sexually abused by my father. Well, for her to process the anxiety of it was trying to be perfect. Now, some of you guys know what I'm talking about. Trying to be perfect, control the whole world so nothing bad will happen.
Right.
And that's what she was using her repeating patterns, trying to stay safe. And it didn't work. Because remember, the problem that the bread, the alcohol, the drugs, the smoking, the cleaning, the shopping, you're running to find safety or a diversion. The problem is you're still taking the problem that's going to end up dumping onto the behavior you're using to escape because it becomes a problem. Now you're 500 pounds and you can't wash parts of your body. Now you have severe allergies or you got severe physical illnesses because of the food and things that you're eating to escape. Or you're always running as a jogger to run from your problem. Now your knees are hurting. Now you can't run. And then you get stuck with this idea of what am I going to do with myself? Because we're still trying to run from what within.
Right.
It doesn't work. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So the person that's being really nice, they're living their life like this
Mhm.
really nice person. They have lots of different programs around that. Let's say they need to be this good person in order to please God. They need to be this good person in order to be the perfect wife. So
Mhm.
so them being nice is a coping mechanism.
Mhm.
That's what's keeping them safe, to be nice. So who would they be if they were not nice? Well, how would they live? What would that look like
Well,
for this person?
again, you have to understand what drives behaviors, one of two things. One is the carrot, which is the benefits, and two is the avoidance of pain.
Mhm.
Now, if you're doing it the avoidance of pain, that's where the problem's going to be. And so I'm going to, now, by the way, there is the whip and the carrot mixed with this. Now, the whip is being punished and the carrot is the bonus, the benefits. Now, there are bonuses and benefits and there are whips in all areas. Why would you find great pleasure in eating chocolate, for example? Because there's pleasure there. Well, the problem is you have diabetes. Why is it you still eating your chocolate? Now, again, your chocolate was your gift, your escape, but now it's creating health problems.
Right.
So there has to be an emotional balance. Again, it goes back to the imprints in the mind. The imprints are memories and references and proofs. So that what is must change. Now, again, the key, most of you may not realize that memories are very malleable and very adjustable when you operate within the system of the mind. Again, Gabor Mate's a great guy. He has some really great information, but one thing he doesn't know how to do is change memories. Memories is the cause of your problems.
Right.
And if you don't know how to change that, you'll be chasing rainbows and rabbits the rest of your life and never catch one.
That's right. So then explain how this ties in, like being nice and depression. What's the link?
Well, again, being nice. Why are you being nice? For fear of bad things happening, or being rejected, or being abandoned, not being loved, right?
Conflict.
And then, of course, you have lots of reasons why you need to be nice, which is depressing because of the pains and hurts that you're dragging with you. So after you do it, you still beat yourself up because you did it, and you're not. In one way, you're saying I'm not honoring myself, but in reality, you are honoring yourself because you're honoring the training. But then you still, but see, you're still, the thing is that the pain that drives a good behavior is screwing up your good behavior.
Mm.
It's like Tim. Tim is a very successful person, has a very well built business, a beautiful house, beautiful family, beautiful everything. And so he booked a session with me, and I go out in the foyer and I get him. He looks like a drug addict. He looks like he's been death warmed over. And I said, Tim, what's going on? He goes, I've got my noose hung up in the attic. I'm ready to kill myself.
Mm.
So really, why? He goes, I think the family would be better off without me. I said, okay. So how do you know? I said, what's going on? Tell me about your life growing up as a kid. So he says, well, I'm from a small town in Oklahoma. My dad was the joke of the town. He was, I mean, he was an alcoholic. He was a loser. He was a joke of the town. And in one day in second grade, the teacher said, you're just as sorry as your brothers and your dad. You'll never amount to anything. So that was a painful moment in his life. And by the way, he's in his 50s or probably in his late 50s. And so this was a major impact in his life. And so at that time, he vowed, I'm going to be somebody. And he worked so hard to be somebody. And he became successful. And he was very successful. But the problem with Tim is he brought that little hurt nobody with him. He was still driven by his pain, not by his pleasure. And of course, the second time, by the way, and he looked like a drug addict because he went to the talk therapist. And talk therapy cannot change memories. Logically understanding why you got a problem doesn't change it. Like the woman who comes in my office and she's crying. She goes, I just know every reason why my dad did what he did, what my mom allowed to do. I understand everything. But why am I so screwed up? I said, I know why you're screwed up. She goes, how? What? I said, it's birth. Had you not been born, you would have no problems. She said, but why am I so miserable? I said, because you're good at it. You built a lifetime of memories and you accumulate them, and then and by the way, antidepressants are not designed for 20-year use. She was still depressed, right? And I said, it's the memories. And so logic will not fix that, but changing and adjusting the memories did fix that. And so we went in, we addressed the memories, changed them. I literally changed the memories so when you remember a bad memory, it's like it's right here in your face.
Yeah.
And when we're done, it's like it's way over there. You know what happened, but it's not you anymore. It's
Right.
gone. Like
So,
it's like I know I was born, but I have no remembrance of it, you know?
right. That is so powerful. I did some research on statistics yesterday, and I heard Dr. Gabor Mate, I heard him say that this is what will heal you. This is the solution that he came up with. He said that it's either we will go through long hours of talk therapy, this is the solution, or it's prescription drugs. And when I looked at the statistics, 70% of the world's population are on some kind of prescription drugs.
Mm.
So can you explain that?
Well, again, it, let's say, for example, you go to your neighbor. I have a neighbor called Phil.
Okay.
Phil's a plumber. He's got a big old fat belly and he has a Beavis and Butthead t-shirt on, And he's a typical I can see your crack fat guy.
Uh-huh.
And you go to Phil and you go, Phil, I'm having panic attacks. I let people run all over me. And you know what Phil's going to tell you? There's something wrong with your pipes. Something inside's broken.
Right,
Now,
exactly.
now, if you go to psychotherapists, now psychotherapy, they do the best they can. They're good people. They're following the training. But the problem is with psychotherapy, they're experts at noticing behavioral patterns. And the model insight therapy is once you understand, it should stop. Now, again, the client, Catherine, she says, I understand everything. Why am I still screwed up? I said, because understanding is a different avenue than neuroplasticity. The brain has memories and references. And if you don't know how to change those memories and references, again, you're chasing rainbows and rabbits. And like Kathy, she comes to see me and she said, I'm on 3 antidepressants. I'm not depressed anymore, but I can't get off the couch either.
Uh,
And I said, and so here it is. Our first session, she was abused at 4 years old by her stepfather, and that drove her addiction program. So she was at one time she was a sheriff. One time she was heroin and cocaine. And one time she went to math, not meth, but she went to marijuana. And each time she went less of addiction, from smoking to AA addiction to now it's only Dr. Pepper addiction. Still driven by an addictive escapism.
right.
And so I went and I addressed memories, and the biggest memory is dealing with this stuff. So if you go to a therapist and they don't know how to change the memories, and you spend a lot of money on it, this one guy, for example, he went to a therapist, had one fear. It reminds me of two people with the same basic problem. One fear, and he went to the therapist. By the time 5 years later, he's got 15 fears or 30 fears. All right. Logic doesn't solve your problem. And two of the practitioners, two of these individuals I work with, they both said exactly the same thing. One of them had a fear of dead birds, and the other one had a fear of trees. That's the guy who went and had a fear of trees. And so, and by the way, it's very similar to another person I know that talked about the same thing. But so I said, what is it? Both of the people I said, what is it about dead birds? What is it about trees that is so scary? They both said the same thing. You know what they said? You never know what they're up to.
Mm,
Dead bird and trees, well, you never know what they're up to. So what were they doing inside their head? You see what I'm saying? So here it is. They're just trees and dead birds.
right.
But when I started working with them, they didn't, by the way, they didn't have memories of why. They just knew they had this problem. So I started asking questions and do a little exploratory. The woman who had a fear of dead birds started with a childhood memory that she even forgot when she was seeing me until I started asking questions. I said, oh, when I was about 5 or 6 years old, my grandfather died, and we went to the funeral. And after the funeral, we went back to Grandma's house, and we're going to have a big dinner. Grandma, with a little 4'5" size, she went out to the chicken coop, got a chicken, cut his head off, and the chicken, dead chicken, chased her around. You never know what a dead bird's up to. That's how she got the fear.
Interesting.
And then, of course, the other guy who was sick when he was sick in bed, fever, and he saw the trees out the window, and he saw monsters in the trees.
Wow.
I don't know what they're up to. By the way, they didn't know that they were even there. They didn't even have the memory of that until we started asking questions to kind of figure it out. So again, being nice is a training to keep you alive and safe. But if you're beating yourself up and you're driven by pain, you're driven by a source that's going to cause you more problems.
Hmm. So is being nice connected to depression?
It depends. Again, there's a variance here. Why are you being nice? What's driving your niceness?
Hmm. Okay. And do you find that there's more women that experience the program of depression, or it's both?
It's all across the board. Why do you
Okay.
think why do you think alcoholism is great amongst men? It's a coping skill.
Right. Okay.
Or sex too. Sex, drugs, and alcohol. There's a great way to escape problems.
Okay.
And the food too. We throw in food too. A lot of people are obese. I mean, we're talking about women and men. It's all across the board because both sexes have traumas.
Right. Okay, so when I did the research on the medications that people are on, 25% of women were on antidepressants, 10% of men were on antidepressants.
Yeah. But they didn't throw in the other antidepressants, which is alcohol or drugs or smoking.
Right, exactly. There's no research on that one or escapism.
Yeah.
In whatever they're
Yeah.
using.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, by the way, these are all coping skills. But again, remember, the addictive substance is not a problem. It's a solution to a problem. You're trying to numb and escape the pain.
Yeah. That is such a good point because people talk to the people that are on prescriptions, like they are on these antidepressants.
I mean, I created I call it the Happy Journal, the Manifestation Journal, in the early days, like 2001, because I had people who are depressed who come to do sessions with me, and I go, "Do you have a good reason to be depressed?" And they go, "Yeah." They go in their head and go, "Yeah, I got lots of reasons." I said, "Do you have any happy memories, any positive memories?" They go, "I'm sure there's something in here," and it gave me the model of thinking that in order to be depressed, you have to have depressing ways and styles to do it. You have to have resources and reasons. No one's ever said, "Yeah, I was at the office and somebody spilled ink toner and everybody in the office are now depressed." They never say, a big old barrel of something dropped off in the highway and now everybody on the highway is depressed. They've always said, "My husband left me, my dog died, my mother hates me, mother-in-law," always something else. And of course, when you go to a therapist or a doctor and they say, "Well, you're depressed, you have a chemical problem," there's not one test to test if it's a chemical problem.
Mm.
None. It's a sales technique to get you
Wow.
on drugs.
Mm.
So it doesn't work. I mean, 20 years on it. I mean, granted, an antidepressant can work only while you're on it. You come back off of it, it all comes back because it's only masking temporarily, just like vodka.
So it's always a mask. It's always a band-aid approach. Yeah.
Well, it's not addressing the cause.
Yes. Okay.
It's escaping.
Mhm.
So you think about it logically. Now, remember, of course, the expert says it's a disorder. It's not a disorder. It's a survival system.
Mhm.
Of course, you think about it logically. Here it is, you're pumping gas in your car. You have a happy-go-lucky child or a happy-go-lucky life, and then you're pumping gas and an accident happens right in front of you. Someone's killed or hurt and harmed. All of a sudden, you have night switch and you're afraid to drive your car and you're afraid to put gas in your car. You go to the therapist, says, "Well, you have a disorder. Your brain's broken now by witnessing something." It reminds me of my little brother, my youngest brother. He's my favorite brother. He's 36 years old, and so he's been to my seminars. He's a really happy-go-lucky kid, big smile, and I don't see how people can be depressed. There's nothing to be depressed about. Well, my brother loved to drink beer, and so one day he's out with his buddies drinking beer, and he drives us in my truck. He delivers gas for gas companies, and so he gets his truck, not driving, gets his truck, closes the door, he falls asleep. There's a knock on the window. It's a police officer. They arrest him for drinking and driving. He wasn't drinking and driving. So he lost his job, lost his truck, and then all the charges were dropped. Now, that was a trauma for him. That was emotional education, right? It really messed his world up. So he introduced a world. Now he understands depression, right? Then later on, he breaks up with his girlfriend. He does something really stupid, and they're all attacking him. And he saw the exact same story happen again, losing everything. And so what he did, he took a gun and killed himself.
Oh.
Killed himself. Why? Because he saw the misery and pain that he had the first time. He projected the second time to be worse, and he didn't want to deal with that. So his way of escaping was a gun. Now, he's my favorite brother. But I don't have pain with that. I see my brother smile. I understand he was hurt. He found the best way. Now, if he could have called me and I could have sorted him out,
Right. Yes.
but he didn't. You know,
Mm.
he didn't.
Yeah. So can you define trauma?
Trauma is emotional education on how to survive in the world. Trauma is an internalized world that we use to stay alive and stay in alignment with. So it's a coping skill. Now, what about a positive trauma? Is there such thing as a positive trauma? You know, I beat you to that question, right?
Yes, I was just gonna ask you.
So if you take my definition, an event, you can call it a trauma. You introduce the world as something you didn't know existed, and then your brain captures it and start using that as survival, and then try to avoid pain. So what's a positive trauma? Well, positive is feeling loved by somebody. It feels really good. And so both of them are the same. To the brain, neither one are bad. If you have a lot of positive experiences, those are emotional education about how the world works. And if you build a lot more of those, you're going to act and perform differently. Now, if you don't have those and you have negative experiences, you're going to act and perform differently. To the brain, neither one is positive or negative. It is just what it is. People who have a better life has less of the negative traumas, or they process it in a different way. So trauma is just an education on how to survive in the world. It's an emotional impact. These are emotional imprints.
Mhm.
Because
Can you word that a different way? The positive trauma?
positive trauma is just an emotional experience that had a good impact on your decisions. A negative trauma has an impact on you that affects your decisions and actions and behaviors. They're both the same, but go in different directions.
Right. Okay.
Remember, to your brain, neither one is bad. Now again, you think about it. Here it is. You've had a great life, a loving life. Really, all your life, you've been really good. At 21 or 25 or 28, you find this, or something happens. Something not so good happens.
Mhm.
You know, then all of a sudden, your world has been shifted. The good stuff fades off, and this big bad thing, unpleasant thing, introduced the world that you didn't know existed. Then all of a sudden, now the world looks different to you, right?
Mhm.
I worked with a woman the other day, and she's had a lot of bad stuff growing up as a child. Dad was abusive, mom, and this and all this stuff. And then she went to an aunt's house, and the aunt was kind, you know, did nice things to her, and it was a positive trauma. It already said, "Oh my God, the world can be good. There are good people in the world." So it affected her in a positive way because she always saw the world as a negative thing until she's been had a new emotional education that people are actually nice out there. It was a total shift of the thinking of the world. It's a paradigm shift.
Right. So, mhm.
But she still has the negative, and now she has a positive. Now that's where the conflict is.
Okay.
That's where the conflict is because which one wins?
Right. Oh,
Whichever has the most resources.
huh. Why do you call it a positive trauma?
Because if it feels good, trauma is this emotional experience. Negative trauma is only an emotional experience.
So,
Education, how the word works. But see, they're using a word. Now, the word trauma comes from, I see, what did it come? It's a Greek word.
mhm.
I forgot what it is, but it's not important.
It's
It's a
wounding.
bad, huh? What?
It's wounding.
Yeah, wound. It's not true. Now, by the way, Gabor Mate says this wound inside you, it's not a fucking wound. It's an experience. Now, if you think about it, if you see it as a wound, you're really screwed.
But that's what I've been doing. I've been seeing trauma as a wound. And that's
It's
why when you
not.
said, before we got on the call, you said you talked about positive trauma. And I'm like, what the HE double hockey sticks is positive trauma.
That's because they're using bad words and understanding.
Wow. Okay. Okay. You have a completely different perspective on trauma.
Yeah, and I mean, the reason is now think about it. It's not because I'm really smart, which I am.
You are
It's
smart.
but because I have to go neutral when we're dealing with your problems because I don't see you're broken or screwed up. I see your brain, your limbic operating system is a survival system to keep you alive. So again, remember, if you have a divided mind, you'll fall apart. A divided house falls apart. But if
Yes.
you look inside yourself, says, I'm not broken. I just have programmings I need to update and change. You can. But if you see it's a wound, you got a wound. You'll always have a scar.
Right. And now you have to work with the scar tissue.
That's all. By the way, memories are not stuck, real, and permanent.
Wow. That is so empowering.
Yeah.
Wow, that is a different perspective. I have to allow that to sink in. Wow, that's good.
Well, we do have a tendency to believe, now this is a very common belief system all across the board, something's wrong with me.
Right.
Something
Absolutely.
something inertly is wrong.
Hmm.
We go back to Adam and Eve, there's a dark mark on your soul.
Yep.
There's always looking away, something's wrong with you. That's not true. You have inside you, I call it the spark of survival. We call it the divine spark. Inside you is a survival machine.
Hmm.
Your true self, I see, is a dynamic force always creating and manifesting. Now, this part of you inside you is there as you came, but even before you came out of the womb, you have this divine spark to keep you alive. Now, the problem with this spark, it doesn't judge anything bad or good. It just uses what's put on top of it. So here you have a childhood, you're born, and all of a sudden you have a mean brother, and you have a mean teacher. And then all of a sudden, this divine spark will start creating a life based on the filters laid on top of it. Now, if you have this divine spark, you have love, joy, kindness, peace, and good experiences, it's going to create that too. It all depends on what layers are laid on top of you from that birth and all the way up forward. You're not broken. You're not screwed up. Your brain is manifesting something that you don't like. And you know why you produce it? Because something's been laid on top of your creative force. Every animal has it. Every human being has a survival system within. And for my brother Chris to kill himself was because he found the only way out he thought he could see. Unfortunately, he
Wow.
did. And even though he knows I could have helped him, he knows, but he chose not to because the pain was so big. He wanted a way out.
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
of course, when I think of Chris, I see his big smile. He's my favorite buddy. He and I run together. That's why I represent Chris. He went through a tough time and he found the only way he could save himself. I mean, I'm in drug rehabs. A drug rehab, people, women, men cut themselves. And I go, why do you cut yourself? They got thousands of marks all through their body using razor blade and glasses. Why would you cut yourself? And you know what they said? It feels better. I feel like I'm releasing something. I said, but you got hundreds of scars. It's still there.
Mm.
It's no difference than cutting yourself than drinking a bottle of whiskey or bang your head against the wall. It doesn't fix it, but changing the reasons why. And that's why she came. I worked on her head. We started changing the abuses and the trauma she went through. There's no reason to cut yourself anymore. There's no reason to put yourself in a bad place because if you change the source, which is memory, references, and proofs, your behavior shifts and changes. You've heard this, the cliche, change your mind, change your life. Let's
Mhm.
change it to more properly, change your memories, and you'll change your life.
I want to talk to that woman who is at home. She is trying to please God. She is serving her husband. And she has, let's say she even has autoimmune disease because 80% of, I think it's out of the statistics, I think it was, let me see, 80% of autoimmune issues are found in women.
Mhm.
So let's say that this woman, she's nice, she's there pleasing God, she's pleasing her husband, and she's sacrificing herself over and over again. She has autoimmune disease now.
Mhm.
Can you speak to her?
There's a better way,
Mhm.
and the way is learning how to change the reasons why you do stuff. Let's go and change the history. Let's go change what it is that is really driving your life, because it doesn't get better until you figure out how to change what you hold within yourself. There is hope. I've worked with lots of people who are severely ill with lupus, Hashimoto disease, fibromyalgia, ME, the list goes on. And all those symptoms are gone by merely making peace with inside your head. You're trying to do the right thing based on your trainings, but your training was driven by pain. Therefore, the pain will go with you even when you think you're doing something good. There is hope, and you can create a whole new life for you, and it starts inside you. It's all about you, and you can change that. And I can help you. I can educate you.
Let's say she's trying to change, but that guilt program, it keeps on coming up.
That's just a program. Yeah,
It's just a
just a
program.
program.
And you can view it as just a program. It's not a part of you. It's not God telling you you're being bad, get back into service of your husband or God
Uh,
or It's just
All of this is just training nonsense, you know,
got it.
training nonsense.
Yeah. Any final thoughts for those listening?
Guys, if you're really tired of being miserable and you want something better, stop chasing rainbows and rabbits. This works. I assure you it works. Come and learn more. I will help you change your life. I'll put you in the driver's seat of your life instead of somebody else driving you in places you don't want to go. It is time to learn how to do that. You've got the rest of your life to live. It's time to live a life of abundance, not a life of misery, hurt, and pain.
So thanks for tuning in to the episode of the Robert Jean Experience. And don't forget to sign up for Robert's free online course and stay tuned for our next episode. We are planning on doing a series on childhood trauma.
All right. Thank you, guys.